Okay, this is podcast number 10. We reached a milestone. Thank everyone for watching all of the podcasts. The question today is, should Christians be engaged in politics? And if so, in what regard? Okay, so the topic today is, should Christians be engaged in politics? I thought the first place we would go is to the Bible and look at examples of people in the Bible and their relationship with politics. And the first example I've come up with is Daniel, who was a Jew but was living in Babylon, and the Jews were under a Babylonian captivity. And somehow or another, he had gained the favor of the king and had been put into a position of authority there, and was very much respected by the king, so much so that Daniel's colleagues, were jealous of the relationship and tried to devise a way to get him into trouble. And they created a law which required Daniel to bow down to the king and worship him, or everyone should, and if not, be put to death. And Daniel just refused to abide by that law, and made it obvious to people that he wasn't, by opening his windows and praying to his God, the God of the Bible. And you may remember that as a result of that, he was thrown into the lion's den, and God saved him from that. But my point is, Daniel did his job well, did what the king asked, but did not obey the king or the laws that these people put together for the king, if it contradicted his faith. Esther, the story of Esther is somewhat similar. At the request of Mordecai, she used her influence to get the king to change his mind about something that was brewing in regard to some aggression towards the Jewish nation. So those are examples of people who were put in a position of authority in a government situation and used it to honor God. But I want you to notice that what they did was nonviolent, all right, and was non-aggressive. They just stood their ground. Peter writes a letter to Christians living in the Roman Empire who were being persecuted, some of who were being killed. And even through that, he says, respect the government. Compare that to today in the United States, where people get their feathers ruffled, but it's nothing like it was back in 60, 63, 65 AD, where people were being persecuted for their faith. And Peter still says, respect the government, obey the laws. Obviously with a caveat that, you don't want to worship their God. And that actually did cause a lot of trouble for people at that time. It's interesting when you may think, well, when did Jesus ever encounter politics? But you might remember the story where someone picked up a coin and said, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Or they just said, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Because in that time, the Jews were under Roman captivity. Much of the Bible, the Jews weren't ruling themselves, were under captivity of one nation or another, sometimes for hundreds of years. Anyway, Jesus said, go pick up a coin, give it to me. So he took the coin and he said, whose inscription is this? And they said, Caesar. And he said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and render unto God that which is God's. People kind of argue about what he really meant by that, but at the very least, he's suggesting that they should respect the governmental authority there. And, there were many Jews at that time that wanted to overthrow the government, and so people theorized that was what Judas wanted to do, and thought that Jesus as a Messiah would be this warrior king that would do that, and that was not what Jesus was about. So I guess one of the main things I want to say from this is that throughout the Bible, respect for governmental authority is being preached, up to the point where if it were to ask you to betray your faith, that obviously you would not be expected to do that. So fast forward to today, what should we be expecting our politicians to do? I just want to go through a list of things. Should we be expecting them to serve people? We kind of lose track. The answer is yes, right? In fact, isn't that what politicians are supposed to do? Is to serve people in different capacities, whatever part of the government they're working in. We've kind of lost sight of that, and a lot of politics has deteriorated to, name calling and saying my ideas are better than yours, and not even listening to what the opposition is saying. Should we respect the opposition? Yes, we should, and it's only really been in the past 20 or 30 years where this has just gotten so bad that basic courtesies are gone. If you were to look like 30 years ago at what politicians did, if there was someone coming up for nomination to the Supreme Court, it'd be, like 98 to 2. The party that wasn't in power respected the ability of the party in power to nominate these people and would not oppose them on philosophical grounds or political grounds, because that was the whole point, is that the president in power had the power to appoint someone. They would only oppose them if there was something wrong with their character, deeply flawed in their character. Today, it's party line vote. We've totally lost respect for the opposition and what the opposition is allowed to do. Should politicians be interested in instituting a Christian church state? There is a minority of people that want to do that, but unfortunately, it scares a lot of people on the other side, and is made out to be maybe more than what it is. But let's just say it, we shouldn't be doing that. Christians should not be doing that. I don't think that's anywhere near what God intends for us to do. If we look at the example in the Bible, Peter was perfectly fine with Christians showing their faith, not as an aggressive reaction to the government, not in a violent way, but just person to person, showing them love and having that speak more volumes than the leaders or people in authority could do. Should politicians be interested in defending the helpless or protecting children who can't protect themselves? And my answer to that is absolutely. And this could be a little controversial. And I'm speaking a little bit about abortion and transgender laws. And I could have a whole video on each one of these. And I know there's strong opinions on both sides. But no matter which side you're on, I think everyone would agree that we want to have fewer abortions. We want to. There's an unborn child there. We want to protect. They can't protect themselves. Somebody has to stand up for them. Are there times possibly when a person feels there's no choice, they don't want to do it, but they feel like, yeah, maybe, and that, again, that's a whole nother video. But I think everyone agrees that we should try to minimize abortions and defend people that can't defend themselves. If a child wants to change gender, what should we be doing? Should we be making it easier for them to do, or passing laws that make it hard for them to do? We should be fighting against that. And I think even if you're transgender, you would agree with that someone who is young and their mind isn't fully developed yet, and they have this wish or desire that could change their lives forever. For children especially, we should be minimizing that possibility. If there's a grown adult that wants to do that, especially if it involves surgeries and drugs and things, it would make me sad if they would, but I would say, okay, that's your choice. But we should be protecting children. And again, this is another topic I could spend a whole video on. Should we be serving the poor? A bigger and bigger part of politics, government, political government involves serving the poor. Well, that's an interesting question because Jesus spent like almost all his time on earth serving the poor. So definitely we should be doing that. But I want to suggest that we should be doing that as citizens. We don't really need the government for that. In fact, I think as Christians, we've dropped the ball on that. Now think about it for a minute. The government does what we can't do for ourselves, correct? If at a moment's notice we could organize and address the needs that we need as cities or states or nations, we would never need government. So why is it that the government is handing out money or food or whatever to poor people? It's because as humans, we've dropped the ball. We haven't cared for our neighbors, especially as Christians. We should be taking every opportunity to interact with poor people or people in need or people that are sick or people that are diseased or people that can't put food on the table. I mean, that's exactly what Jesus would want us to do. Well, there are people that aren't getting that and have to go to the government for it. So should the government do that? Yeah, I guess, but I would much prefer it if we as humans, as individuals, just did that to our fellow man and served his needs ahead of our own. Which political party is the best, Democrat or Republican? Not a chance. There's no way I'm going to answer that question. And if you think one party is the God's party and the other isn't, your mind is all messed up. Both parties have good and bad points, and you're getting the absolutely wrong idea of what politics is all about. Because what you're doing when you say that is you're creating opposition, and it creates a lack of respect for other people's points of view. So that's what I would view the job of politicians to be. As citizens, what's our job with respect to politics? Well, clearly the examples in the Bible is respect government, not to defy government, not to be a violent or aggressive towards government, respect the decisions of government. Don't have to agree with it, right? And you can go through the proper channels to show your disagreement. But I think we've lost that in this country, and we need to get it back. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of things that citizens can do that the government wouldn't have to do. As Christians, like I said earlier, we need to be watching out for our fellow human beings and to serve them in ways that would take load off government and do exactly what Jesus has asked us to do. So I don't know. I apologize if I ruffled some feathers. Didn't mean to. I totally respect your point of view. If you want to leave a comment, I'd appreciate it. Love you all. See you next week.